Hello and welcome to episode 42 of the official EstablishTheRun.com podcast. My name is Adam Levitan. I'm one of the co-founders here at ETR, and today we are joined by one of the true trailblazers in the gambling streets. This is a young man who reached the top of the high-stakes online poker world about 15 years ago as Green Plastic, a young man who started one of the first poker training sites in CardRunners, a young man who started the DFS site, Draft Day, been playing Nosebleed Stakes DFS since shutting that site down, held the title of Director of Sportsbook for Rush Street Gaming, has his own Wikipedia page, for goodness sakes, and now his greatest challenge yet, helping Evan and I on the business side of EstablishTheRun.com. It is, of course, Taylor Caby. Taylor, what's going on, buddy?
Thanks for the introduction, and I'm glad you called me a young man because that makes me feel good. But I feel like I'm a grizzled veteran of the gambling industry by now.
Yeah, we're going to get into all of that. I got to know or became aware of Taylor when he was climbing to the top of kind of the heads up no limit world in poker, and then when he started CardRunners, I got to know him a little bit there by doing actually an interview, which is wild. But I did an interview when one of my first jobs was at Metro newspaper. We ran like a gambling page, and I was obviously into poker, and I did an interview with Taylor way back then. And fast forward, I don't know, 12 years or something like that. And now we're working on Establish the Run together. So life comes full circle sometimes. The goal of this pod, this interview, this discussion is just to talk through some of the industry stuff that's going on, also get to Taylor's background, but talk through a lot of the industry stuff that's going on. Obviously, the state of DFS, daily fantasy sports, our outlook on sports betting, what to expect there going forward. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this. I think few people kind of have the same perspective that Taylor would on what's going on in gambling and DFS and sports betting as they would right now. I think that's fair to say, right, Taylor?
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, I've been in this industry for a long time, and I've seen a lot. And one thing that just totally jumps out randomly I was thinking of is, you interviewing me 12 years ago, which I honestly don't even remember. And hearing you pursued like something you were interested in, writing about gambling and sports for like a local newspaper that like didn't even have a website and is just like distributed for free in Philadelphia, if I'm not mistaken. And now, like so many people wouldn't be willing to pursue something like that, I don't think, and like wouldn't have any idea, where it was going to go. And frankly, probably didn't think it was going to work out how it did. But honestly, like, it's such a good learning lesson because like you put in the time, like long before DFS even existed, and started building up your knowledge, and here you are. So it's cool to see it all work out,
Yeah. Taylor was like, oh, why don't you go find the article? That'd be funny to read, the article you interviewed me. And I was like, well, the thing of it is the newspaper didn't even have its own website. So all right. We have a ton to get to today. I don't want to spend a lot of time on poker, but I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about poker because, obviously I still like poker, and there was a time where I was playing a ton of poker. I know you were as well. When you were at the top of the mountain, taking on all comers, I'm curious what you think kind of gave you the confidence to go down the path of trying to win at the highest stakes, and what that time was like in poker, and kind of what made you get out of it.
Yeah, for sure. And honestly, like it just kind of worked out by accident. I think like not unlike you getting into DFS and fantasy because you liked it. Like I just really liked playing poker, and I was broke and, like 16 years old. This is like before online poker really existed, and just started playing in home games. And, I had no idea that internet poker was going to happen. And I happened to be pretty decent at it by the time internet poker happened, just because I liked it. And I get pretty obsessive about stuff. And, it wasn't like I started out playing high stakes. I started out playing really small stakes. And after the course of like, a year and a half, like had built up some money. And it was a wild time, like not unlike DFS, like 5 plus years ago, when like nobody knew what the hell was going on. And, like it was basically like a bunch of kids making money, and a bunch of like older people that did it as a hobby, like losing money. That was just kind of what was happening. And I think I got pretty lucky, honestly. Like I worked hard, but like, I mean, I looking back, I know I had to run good, just because I I just know that I wasn't that sophisticated, but maybe relatively I was compared to a lot of people, but it could have gone the other way pretty easily. So, and as far as why I got out of it, I think I'm pretty good in general at recognizing when I have an edge at something. And I had started CardRunners just kind of on a whim, like because I wanted to get some business experience, and it was going really well. But I was focusing all my time on that, and you just can't be really great at doing a lot of things at the same time. So like by the time like I don't know 2008 2009 came around, like it was pretty clear I was more interested in the business, and frankly I thought there was more potential in the business, and so I focused on it. But I just sort of backed off playing a little bit at that point, and then by the time Black Friday came in 2011, I was already on the way to starting a DFS site and just kind of getting out of poker mostly.
Yeah. I've talked about this before. I feel like one thing that was tough for me and I kind of regretted was like, man, when I was playing poker before Moneymaker boom also. And when everything happened, I was like, oh man, this is great. I'm just gonna play and I'm gonna win all the money playing and I'm gonna put all my effort into playing. It never even like occurred to me that poker would be a $1 billion business industry and there was a way bigger ceiling and concentrating on the business side of thing. And same thing with DFS. I didn't really learn my lesson. Now at first I was just like, oh, this is great. I'm just gonna play DFS and make all the money. And it took me a while to realize actually the ceiling is way bigger and actually, the stakes are way higher and there's just more going on, I think, on the business side than straight playing, even though I love playing so much and I still play DFS a ton. I know you still play DFS a ton. I'm curious, do you ever play poker at all anymore or do you miss it at all? Is there ever a chance to play?
Yeah, I played 2 weeks ago, 2-5 at the Win, and was probably the biggest fish at the table. I'm kind of exaggerating, but like I was absolutely targeted by every pro at the table, and I think until people at least could tell I was competent. But yeah, I don't really play online at all, and I would play live if I was like kind of near a good game that I knew about. But I've got a kid now, I'm married, I've got a lot of stuff going on work wise, so I don't have much time for it.
Yeah. Okay. Enough poker. That's old news. Let's get to DFS. How did you find DFS? When and where did you start playing? What was your introduction to DFS?
Yeah, so I don't think very many people know this, but I was actually an investor in what I think is the first DFS site in 2007, and it was called Instant Fantasy Sports. And it was started by a guy named Chris Fargas, who actually works for DraftKings now, and he was a former poker player. And I think all the investors, or most of them, were poker players at the time. And like this was the craziest thing. In my mind, I was like, man, it's sit and goes, which is a poker game for fantasy sports, and they didn't have salary cap. And I was just like, this like can't possibly fail. Like in my mind, being like dumb and young. And then it obviously it didn't work out, and I think the idea was just too early at the time, and smartphones didn't even really exist at that time. Like there was just such a crazy time. But in the back of my mind, I was like, okay, there could be something here. And then like 2 or 3 years later, FanDuel like got started. And when I was running CardRunners, the training site at the time, like I think FanDuel reached out to us and wanted to like do a partnership or like have us become promoting them or something. And we, of course, being young and dumb again, we were like, oh, well, why would we promote these guys when we could just like start our own daily fantasy site and like take over the world? And we'll get into the details behind that, but that led us in 2010 to starting building Draft Day. Black Friday happened in 2011 when poker kind of never became the same again in the U.S. and basically got outlawed for lack of a better way to say it. And in mid 2011, we launched Draft Day, which at the time maybe was like the, I don't know, fifth or something daily fantasy site.
Um, what made you think you could start your own DFS site? Because when I think of challenges that come with stuff, it's like, man, I can't even fathom going state to state and I know at the time it wasn't about that, but like I couldn't even fathom like all the legal issues that you knew would be, or at least you thought would be coming down the line, and all the competition that you knew you would face. What made you think you could actually start your own DFS site?
Yeah, so a big part of it was just like being ignorant and overconfident. And I think you have to like put yourself in my shoes at the time. Like I had started playing poker with nothing and like became one of the highest stakes players. I'd started a business with no business experience, and it had been really successful for some years. I honestly just thought it's like, okay, like if I work hard and like I'm really smart, so I can figure stuff out and it's going to work. And of course, I knew there was a chance it wasn't going to work, but like I definitely underappreciated like the what can go wrong, the risk, things like that. So that's the biggest part of it. But at the same time, I had learned a lot by playing poker and by really being in touch with like what players wanted at the tables and like gambling and really getting it, not just from the business side of like how to run it, but just like the product side. And I felt like FanDuel at the time was just not a great product. And, some people still say that today about it or about certain parts of it. And we thought, okay, we can make a better site. And that was really the biggest reason. And I was completely unaware of like all the venture capital money that would have to be raised in order to be successful, and which we did raise some, but not nearly what DraftKings and FanDuel eventually did. And I was just ignorant. But at the same time, I was smart enough to like put it all together and get the site going and get traction. And like people that have been around in DFS at the time, like I think most of the people were pretty impressed with the site we put together. It just never like reached commercial success, So I'm proud of what we were able to do, and I don't regret doing it, except for like the stress and the money we lost. But I learned a lot from it for sure.
What happened? So people know what happened exactly to draft day.
Yeah, so in I would say 2013-ish, we realized like DraftKings and FanDuel were just like rocket ships, primarily because they had raised a ton of money and were spending it. But I thought there's just no way we're gonna like beat them. And I felt like there was only going to be one or two sites that stuck around, and it was like a winner take all or winner take most market. So to my credit, I just said to like Andrew and I just talked about it, and we were just like, let's try to find a buyer for this. Like there can be like we talked to all the big media companies, and we almost got an acquisition from one of them that fell through. And then we were just like, what? Let's just try to sell this to whoever will pay us the most, and let's move on. And sometimes you have to quit while you're behind, and I think that was a really good lesson for me that, first of all, be very careful like what markets you get into, but second of all, be willing to fold, if you need to. And we got out with, we lost money for sure, but and time, but it wasn't the end of the world.
Okay, so once you sell draft day, you can play DFS. Obviously, I think you stick mostly to the football streets, but I think you're certainly qualified to talk about the state of DFS today. And I want to spend some time on this because it's one of the most popular questions that I get a lot. People want to know about what's going on with the state of the DFS industry, and there's a few different angles here. I guess the first one that we can talk about is like all this bitching from quote unquote pros and WPs. I call them WPs that want to be pros, about how tough the games are, wah, wah, wah. And my point has always been that, yeah, if you want to play 50K a slate, if you want to play 30K, 100K a slate, yeah, I got news for you, buddy. It's going to be tough. But for 99.5% of the field, 99.9% of people listening to this that are trying to play 50 or 100 or $500 at most and have some fun, and with an understanding of game selection, I think the games are just fine. So let's start there about the state of the competition in DFS. What's your take there?
Yeah, for sure. And I think having gone through poker, like, has taught me a lot about this, and having seen the same thing happen in DFS, like it's not rocket science. What people saw in like 2000 and well, I'll say like 2014, 2015, because that people kind of refer to that as the glory years of DFS. That's just not realistic. Like that's just the bottom line. If you're comparing anything to that time when like there is a ton of money flowing in, a ton of idiots playing, and or just people that don't even understand like the rules sometimes, and or certainly aren't using projections or any sort of like paid analysis, you're making a mistake to have that as your baseline for anything. So that's the first thing. The second thing is like, first of all, I still think there is decent money to be made playing DFS. The guys that are, hoping to make millions a year, and there are still guys out there doing that, that's, mostly a pipe dream. But like to make it be a profitable hobby where, you get to watch sports, challenge yourself to, try to beat people in a competition, which is fun. Like you can still make money doing it. And I couldn't tell you the percentage of people. If I had to guess, I would say there's probably over 5%, maybe less than 10% of people could be winning players if I had to ballpark it, and there's hundreds of thousands of people playing DFS, if not maybe a million plus total, if you include like really casual people. So there's still a lot of room for a lot of people to make some money. Like that's just the bottom line. And then the final thing I think that people just keep forgetting is that if someone told you could break even playing DFS, paying for some content, playing the games, watching the sporting events, like that's pretty fun. And like I think you have a chance for life-changing money. And I think a lot of people, especially like DFS Twitter and gambling Twitter, and don't get me wrong, these people have really good points, and some of the things are completely fair, and we'll talk about that. I just think a lot of people lose sight of the fact that it is a lot of fun to play DFS, and like it shouldn't be something that's going to be easy, because you're having a lot of people competing against you in something that's fun and potentially profitable, and that just makes for an environment that's tough to make money.
Yeah, I feel bad sometimes, because not bad, but people who listen to me for the last 5 years or whatever, I've obviously been partial to not just playing like lottery style GPPs, like put up a little and try to win a million, right? I've been encouraging people to be more selective with their games and play cash. And I get that it's not that fun to turn $10, into 18 or 50 into 90 or, et cetera, et cetera. I get that. For me personally, I like to win. And when we push people towards these really large field GPPs, well, then it's like, oh, well, you're playing fine, but you're still, you're still really, really likely to lose on this week. So I don't know. Do you think I'm doing a disservice to the industry by telling people that the man's game is cash, and that the tournament stuff is just for people just trying to mess around and have fun?
No, I think your heart is definitely in the right place with trying to like be fair to people and to not give them false, expectations. But look, the best piece of advice I would say is that if you want to do well at anything, just go where there are people that don't know what they're doing. And there's absolutely no doubt that the tournaments attract more people that are not really familiar with the best strategies or that serious about DFS. And again, that's not like a bad thing. Like these guys are enjoying having a good time playing at a very small chance at a long shot amount of money, or a large amount of money. And, for you to say, hey, I like to grind, I like to just, eke out a small edge, like that's great for you, because you are a grinder and you're really good at like assessing what the top plays are for every, for anything. And I think most people, it's harder for them to do than it is for you, probably, first of all. But the most important thing is just there's more money when there are more fish. And, I hate to even use the term like fish. It's just these are people that are not pros playing, just people that are recreational, and the money has to come from somewhere. So I think if you're a player out there listening, you have to think to yourself, like, what does DFS mean to me? Like, is it something that I want to like, do I want a small chance at a lot of money? Do I just want to like try to compete to find out what the best possible team is for each slate or each day? That's more of like a cash game thing for finding the best team. But if you're looking at life-changing money, obviously that's tournaments, and your EV, your expected return is probably higher playing tournaments, but you're just going to have to go through prolonged stretches of losing to get there. So I don't really know how to say it. There's no right or wrong answer, but you got to think about it for yourself.
Yeah, sure. And I always encourage people to figure out what their goals are, but I do think that, even in today's games with, proper game selection, I think, a realistic ROI for people should be, I think people can win anywhere from like 7% to 15%. Obviously you're not going to be getting off 20K, 50K in a slate, but, I think a lot of people can strive to that. And it's just fun. I like trying to figure out what the best team is. And who's going to score the most points and not worry about other stuff. But anyways, that's just me. Not everybody has to play like me, is I guess what my point is. Let's move to some of the kind of challenges the industry is facing. We can start with Bachelorgate. There is an overwhelming, I think, I don't know. I don't want to say consensus, because, the people who I think don't get it to some degree are often the loudest. But, just from people, casual people I meet on the street, they say, hey, I can't play. I don't want to play DFS. People, the pros are putting in, they can't lose. They're putting in 150 lineups. People just don't understand the concept of MME. They don't understand there's single entry tournaments out there for them to play. And then this Bachelorgate thing was like, the cherry on top where they could point to it and say, hey, you see, the pros are multi-accounting. They're putting in 300. How could I ever win? Forgetting the fact that the guy who multi-accounted is probably losing players. So the more entries that he puts in, the more likely he is to lose. But anyways, what's your take on the current state of the challenges DFS is facing from a casual player perspective?
Yeah, well, if putting in 150 lineups means you can't lose, then I certainly would like to have my money back from the Super Bowls. But yeah, no, I mean, I think the problem is that there are just valid arguments on both sides, and like there's no like God's not going to come down and like tell us what the right answer is. Like, we don't have all the data. Like even the DFS sites are making like informed judgments on what to do for policies and stuff without knowing for sure what the right move is. And I think the thing that I keep leaning on, like when I think about this, is like there needs to be rules that are understandable by people and then enforce. And like I guess I go back to the idea that like the fact that like a guy and his wife put in 300 lineups to the same tournament, that to me by itself is not necessarily wrong. Now, if this is a person that like doesn't play fantasy sports and like her husband just creates the teams and like enters them into the contest for her, well then I don't think that should be allowed. But like, what if I want to play with my wife and we both talk DFS, we both put together lineups, we both have a subscription to a site that generates lineups, or we make them on our own. Like, should we both not be allowed to play in the contest? And I think to me, if I was writing the rules, I would just say that anybody that plays has to make and submit the lineups on their own. And obviously, you'd write it this is a lawyer would write these rules, but like, I don't think it should be against the rules for a husband and a wife to sit down and like legitimately play, 300 teams. And even if like one of them is more serious than the other, what if they're sitting at the same computer together and like saying, oh, I really like this guy today. Let's change his exposure or whatever. I just don't see anything wrong with that. Now, the problem is I just, you have to actually have people legitimately playing, and that can be tough to prove. But poker sites have dealt with this forever. With bots are a huge problem in online poker. And I know some of the sites have actually gone through and said, put a webcam on, start playing, and I want to make sure that the account can actually play the same way that the hands have their hand histories would dictate they've played from past play. So what would be the problem with actually messaging an account from like say DraftKings does and says, look, we have some suspicions about if you're actually using the account. We need you to sit down and like next time you're making lineups, put the webcam on and make them and just show us your process. And if they can't do it, then they're gone. And I know that's complicated. I know there might be some things I'm not considering, but I just feel like there has to be rules that are followed. But at the same time, it's not as simple as saying husband and wife can't play.
Sure. No, I mean, husband and wife playing is not a problem. Skirting entry limits by multi-accounting is a problem, right? It seems pretty clear to me.
Sure, but like, so is it okay for a husband and wife to put in 300 on the same bankroll? If like, what is the differentiating factor of when that is okay and when it's not okay?
Well, yeah, of course, people are going to say that if there's no overlap in the 300 lineups, then obviously that they worked from the same pool and they skirted the entry limit. You know what I mean? Because otherwise you could have 9 wives and then you'd have 150 times 9 lineups.
Well, sure, but like I talk to people almost every time I'm playing DFS. I'm talking to other people about ideas and plays and guys I like or don't like. And I don't see any problem if two people are actually building the teams together, meaning they're both working together, playing 300 teams, because they're not going to want to play the same. They're using their own knowledge, but like that's different than going into a 3-man contest and differentiating their teams and kind of ganging up on someone in a 3-man. So these are, in my opinion, incredibly nuanced things, and that's why it leads to really difficult like rules or difficulty enforcing the rules and creating the rules. But I just don't think it's clear what the right answer is.
Yeah, I think generally speaking, a lot of people, myself included, I was like, oh, I'm not into Showdown. When DraftKings first released their format for XFL, I was like, oh, this is brutal, and I think if you zoom out, a bigger point is, listen, what's better for casual players is likely better for the industry as a whole. So like, it's not a coincidence that Showdown is insanely popular. Obviously, there is an edge to be had for people who play Showdown well. However, it's also smaller, I think, and it's just easier for casuals to make teams, and they have fun with it. They only have to, know one game. They only have to have 6 roster spots. So it gets insanely popular. I mean, Showdown is like ridiculously popular. So if you zoom out, instead of just like immediately bitching every time, your ROI shrinks a little bit, if you are a winning player, think about the sustainability of the game and having casual people having fun playing. So, I try to never complain and whine, at least publicly, but I definitely wouldn't do it about stuff going on in DFS that's better for casual players. Are you following what I'm saying, Taylor?
Yeah, for sure. And it's just complicated. Like the Showdown example is great because like my friends from my season long league who 2 years ago, 3 years ago were just crying about how DFS was unfair, and it was at the time the narrative was it was all algorithms winning. And like, yeah, I knew all the people that were like, or most of the people that were playing high stakes, and it was like, yeah, they might be using some, like fantasy, lineup creation sites or whatever, but these are like publicly available projections, and like it's not rocket science that's going into most of this stuff. And now, of course, the narrative is like, collusion or entry limit skirting or whatever. But like the bottom line is these guys are playing Showdown, and they weren't playing for a couple of years. Showdown, in my opinion, brought people back into DFS, and like, look, it's not great. Like for cash games, like it's not a great format, especially on DraftKings where they price the players like extremely accurately compared to their like, actual or theoretical value. But like, I just think that like it's in the best interest of people in the community to police things. And I think it's great that people make their voices heard. I think that does help. At the same time, being aware of the big picture that like the game depends on recreational players being a part of it is just something to keep in mind. And, we all have to try to support the industry to the point where it can thrive.
Yeah. Speaking of the industry, there's been, I don't know, I feel like there's some people who think that DFS is in decline, that the DFS market is shrinking perhaps at the expense of sports betting. Before we get into sports betting, though, I'm just curious what you think of the current state of DFS from a market perspective, from a sustainability perspective.
Yeah, I think it's gonna keep getting harder for pros. I mean, like real pros that are like making their entire or most of their living from it. But I don't see any reason to think that it's not going to be relatively similar for the guys that are playing, like you said, $10, $50, $100, whatever on a slate. That to me feels, from a player's perspective, like it's basically how it is now is pretty much how it's going to be. As far as an industry's perspective, I mean, it's really fun. It's really popular. The DraftKings and FanDuel are going after the sports betting market, which we're going to talk about in a minute. And that's going to require them to go out and spend a lot of money on getting their brands out there in front of people, and a lot of money on getting people to sign up for whether it's the DFS site or the sports betting app. And that's a good thing, getting people that are engaged in the market playing. Like, I just think there's some longevity in DFS. And I think like, I don't think the sky is falling, and nor do I think there's going to be like sustained, like big growth or anything.
Yeah. I mean, the thing for me is that, and when you talk about DFS versus sports betting, people say, oh, sports betting is just going to cripple the DFS games. Nobody's going to play DFS anymore. Everybody's going to sports bet. To me, and maybe I'm probably sicker than most people out there, but I know that winning at DFS, it can be a lot of work, but I like to work, and it's just like, it's more interesting to me to play against my peers, in poker or in DFS, than it is to try to beat some, insanely liquid, insanely efficient market like sports betting. Now, that said, I understand that sports betting is fun, because people can get a sweat on a game. You can do like zero research on a sports bet, and you'll win somewhere between like, I don't know, 47 and 53% of your bets, over a reasonable sample. Like, of course you're going to lose money, in the long run because of the juice. But like, if you wait for the closing line and you just pick a side and bet, like, you're not getting it in bad. Like, it's almost impossible if you're in a big market like NFL or NBA or whatever. But the thing to me is like, I like competing against my peers. I fantasy to me is so much deeper. And so I find it way more interesting. And I think there's a lot of people out there like me that actually prefer DFS to sports betting, that think that they can actually, or know they can actually win whereas beating a market like the sports betting market is a really, really tall task. I don't think people understand how tall of a task it is. So what do you think about this whole sports betting versus DFS debate? And is sports betting going to eventually hurt the DFS market?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're a DFS player and you think that it's unfair or it's bad out there with how tough the DFS games are, then don't go and try sports betting, because if you think like quote unquote syndicates in DFS are a big problem, which maybe they are, maybe they aren't. That sports betting by its nature, that is exactly how it works. There's no like limits on the amount that one piece of information could find its way into the market. Like, this is what's going on. There are groups of people that have great information, that are really talented, and are betting lines across the world to get them to the point where they are efficient or fair or whatever you want to call it. And for better or worse, DFS, like, there is much less of that. It's just much harder. It's much more enforced. It's just a more inefficient market. So like, that's of course sort of an aside, but like I don't think sports betting, the expansion of sports betting legally, is going to make the fantasy sports players want to play fantasy sports less. Will there be some players that maybe because they can get a sports bet really easily and it's easier, maybe trend a little more towards sports betting? Yeah, I definitely think that will happen, but I think that will be mitigated by the amount of money that will be spent on the fantasy brands that kind of some people forgot about, for the last 2 or 3 years, that just weren't as prominent after all the scandals that went down. And I guess I just see DFS as just different. And it's kind of like prop betting, or it's a combination of fantasy and prop betting and then game theory. And, it's a really complex game because, for example, in basketball, if the starting point guard's out and, there's a backup coming in and playing, like, that shifts the entire like landscape of a slate. Like, and different players have different values, and, they may not move the spread very much, but they're going to move the entire DFS slate in a way that is like super complicated. And that's something that like is just a different concept than exists in sports betting. And I think there's just different strokes for different folks. And I don't see that going away.
Yeah. I mean, the argument would be that DraftKings and FanDuel are just using DFS now as a vehicle to convert sports bettors, right? Like, they don't care that much about DFS. And I don't think this is true, actually. I mean, we both know people at DraftKings and FanDuel. I don't think this is true, but I think that's the assumption that, hey, they've forgotten about DFS. This is just a vehicle for them to get sports bettors, and similarly, I guess, there's a lot of content sites out there that think, oh, well, we have some fantasy players on our site. Now we're just going to be these massive affiliates and stuff like that for sports books. I think that there's still more than enough people that are like me, that are like us, that just love fantasy. And I don't think that DraftKings and FanDuel have any intention of kind of letting their DFS products fall off the wayside. But maybe you see it differently. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, the short answer is I don't really know. And I think reasonable people could disagree. I guess I would say if I was them and I had a really large amount of customers that were clearly like gambling, playing on something that's legal across the country before sports betting is legal, I personally would want to be doing everything I could to foster that ecosystem, make sure that it was still, an attractive product for those customers. And then, of course, I'd be upselling them sports betting and casino once it's legal in the states that it becomes legal in. But I just don't see why I wouldn't want to keep both of them there, because it's kind of an unfair advantage that the DFS sites have, to be honest with you, against the other people in the sports betting and casino market. Like, they have a product that is fun for some people, offers big payouts, and they can market that across the country. And I guess I just don't really, and I don't know, honestly. The naysayers could completely be right, but like, if I was them, I would really be trying to keep the DFS ecosystem alive and well.
All right, let's talk about sports betting for a little bit. You have another unique thing on your resume. This sportsbook director for Rush Street Gaming. For you guys that don't know, Rush Street Gaming owns a bunch of casinos. They own one here in Philadelphia, formerly known as Sugar House. What's it now? Like Bet Rivers or something like that?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. First, let's. I guess before we get into the tougher questions, I'm curious what your experience was like as a sportsbook director for Rush Street. Why don't you let people know what your kind of role was and what you thought about working on the other side of the counter, whereas, you've been a poker player and a DFS player and a DFS operator now as a sportsbook director. What was that like?
Yeah, it's funny. People, when I talk to people about this, they think I was like the guy at like the counter, like taking the tickets and like,
Yeah.
I don't know, like just moving the lines and stuff. And it certainly wasn't anything like that. I like the role that I had was overseeing with a group of people, but being part of that group, the rollout of online sports books in New Jersey, in Pennsylvania, and then kind of heading up the team that provided services to the retail, which are brick and mortar sports books. And like you said, in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and then Rush Street has some more partners now since I've left. But it was basically like early days of online sports betting in the U.S. and just working with the company that was trying to offer those products to customers. And it's from anything from marketing partnerships or kind of branding or customer acquisition or just really it's a startup still. I mean, all of these companies are still startups, arguably even DraftKings and FanDuel. And, just doing anything you can to push the company and the site forward was what I was doing. And it was an awesome experience because, first of all, Rush Street Interactive is the name of the company, not Rush Street Gaming, but Rush Street is an awesome company and first-class people, like really great to work with people that had like a lot of like experience in regulated gambling, where I was sort of just always on kind of an outsider. And like learning from people that are smarter than you is always something that I would tell people is a great idea. And dealing with like regulators and stuff too, not that I was the direct person dealing with them, but hearing about how like you have to follow the rules in a certain way, and if one like word is off on like an advertisement, or you don't have enough space dedicated towards like problem gambling messaging, and just there's like 1,000 different little rules that like people on the outside don't think about. And just kind of learning about that, and honestly just sort of like having a level of attention to detail and sort of just doing the right thing all the time, and every little detail matters, was just a really good takeaway that I had from working there. And I still work part-time for them too. I'm something of a consultant for them now, I guess, but I'm not full-time in the role because I'm with ETR.
Okay. The big thing on sports betting that everybody seems like the hot button issue is people getting cut off, right? And it's funny to me because this doesn't apply. I mean, 99% of people are not going to get cut off, but I understand where people are coming from, because they say, well, if I ever get good, if I work really hard at this and I get really good at sports betting and I'm actually a winner, I'm a winner via line origination, or I'm a winner via, picking off bad lines or comparing lines, board sweeping, or whatever you want to call it. Well, they're just going to cut me off and tell me, to hit the road, or they're going to limit me to $25 a bet or $10 a bet, or whatever. And so people get tilted, and I get that. They say, even though I understand I'm never going to be a pro, they won't even give me a chance to aspire to be a pro, right? And I think a lot of poker and DFS aspirational, right? They want to be the next Green Plastic, they want to be, Peter Jennings or in DFS or whatever it is, right? And there's so much aspirational about it. And then the thing is, it's hard to aspire to be the next, I don't know, Rufus Peabody or whatever, when you try to start winning, and the next thing you know, the whole game is just getting action. It's not even making bets. It's finding someone to actually take your bets. So I know you've been on both sides of the counter. Do you understand where people are coming from about the frustrations of seeing other people even getting limited and or cut off?
Yeah, for sure. This is one that like I think is a perfect example of like there are really reasonable arguments on both sides, and like the what's right is just hard to figure out. And like, okay, you can look at like the people that are upset that they cannot bet on make a sports bet because they've been limited by sites. Well, I mean, the bottom line is these guys are really good, and they're beating the house long term without question. That's the reason they're pros. That's by definition they are taking money from the casino with every bet, or they're expecting to win with every bet they make. And you can say, okay, well, that's just the cost of running a sports book. I think that's a fair point. However, none of the online sports books are profitable at this point. And I think people forget or just aren't aware of the expenses and the headaches that go into running the sites, into paying for the gambling license, paying, data fees to the sports leagues, and all the costs that go into it. Sports betting is a really low margin business as it is. I mean, you talked a few minutes ago about how low edge it is in general, and everything's basically a coin flip, and the vig is pretty small. That really adds up to, books are making really good money on parlays, and they're making very minimal money overall on singles. And a big part of this is because there are sharp players out there. And, you look and you go, okay, and I can see someone saying, well, so what? Like that's just what happens when, you offer a service, you need to let people play. Well, I mean, that's not how it works in blackjack in a casino. Everybody accepts that if you're counting cards, you're going to get kicked out of the casino. And is sports betting exactly the same as blackjack? No, definitely not. But at the same time, I don't think it's unreasonable for a site to say, look, we cater to recreational sports fans, and that's our business model. If you're a pro, you can have really small limits, or you can go somewhere else. I get how that doesn't play well and how some people don't like that. At the same time, like I saw firsthand how expensive it was to operate these companies and how they're all losing money. And, you might say, okay, well, in 5-10 years, they'll be making money when all this irrational exuberance is out of the market, whatever. That may be true, but it's certainly not true right now. So I don't really know where I honestly, I see it from both sides. I'm sympathetic to professional gamblers, but I think people need to understand that this isn't just some money press like everybody thinks it is.
Sure. I think it rubs, it rubs people and probably rubs me the wrong way too. It's like, oh, well, we're only going to take action from people who are going to lose. It just doesn't seem American. You know what I mean? And I get that it's the same way in blackjack. I would never, it makes me sick when I walk through a casino, like I actually get a bad feeling in my stomach because it pains me to watch people play blackjack. No, and I don't want to spend too much more time on this. I would say that, if they have a sharp account and somebody bets and they move the line, and they're free to move the line as many times or as much as they want before letting somebody bet again. But anyways, this is I don't even want to spend any more time on this. I'm curious where you think things go in the sports betting market. Obviously, I think DraftKings and FanDuel, to me at least, are ahead from a tech perspective and from a kind of lead into the state's perspective. A lot of these states already have DFS players. They have huge databases of people who play fantasy football, and we know that, or play DFS football or any DFS sport. And obviously these people are extremely likely to bet on sports also. So to me, though, a lot of it's just a tech thing. Like, my friends, they want to bet on the site that has the best app and the site that pays them the easiest and the quickest if they win, and has the best promotions. Like, that's pretty much it. But I'm curious what you think, how it plays out in the industry side of the sports betting game.
Yeah, I think that, anybody that's been paying attention knows that DraftKings and FanDuel have an advantage with their database and their brand being recognized. But I think it's still a long game of, you're going to see more people from Europe getting involved. You're seeing companies from the US that have casinos in the US that have a large footprint or have a footprint in states with a lot of people in them. Like, this is, DraftKings and FanDuel had like a 6-year head start on everybody else, basically. And, I just see it like if you're looking out in 10 years or, God forbid, 20 years, like, it would not surprise me at all if, DraftKings and FanDuel were in the mix, but not the market leader. Or it wouldn't even surprise me at all if one of them wasn't around anymore. As crazy as that sounds, because I think there's just like so much that can happen. And, I just think it's too early to call, and it's great that people are competing. These sites are competing because it's going to be good for the players.
All right, before we wrap up here, we got to bring it full circle. Obviously, Taylor has a ridiculous resume. He had this big job at the Sportsbook, et cetera, at a time when Sportsbook were seemingly set up ideally. Taylor's played the biggest stakes, everything, #HowRich. So the people want to know why Taylor invest all this time and energy into establish the run the world's, if I do say so myself, the world's preeminent fantasy football website.
One of the world's smallest fantasy websites. Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think like the best answer is, I've learned, like, when you get the chance to work with like really good people, you should take it, like, no matter what it is. And that's not to say I wasn't before, but like you and Evan are like, honestly, in my opinion, the top two fantasy analysts out there. And to have a chance to work with you guys and build a team that's only like, quality over quantity, which is what we're doing. And, really try to put out a high end product. And that was the first thing. And I also really like fantasy and DFS. So that really, really helps. But I think the other thing that I noticed, and I'm thinking about this more as time goes on, I think we're heading more towards where like premium content on the internet is even more and more valuable, because there's so much crap out there. And like we're entering a time where it's like, if you Google something, the stuff that comes up is just like whoever's the best at like gaming Google. And like this is not just like for gambling, this is just like anything. And I think people are really like starving for like trustworthy sources. They're willing to pay for them. And I guess I just feel like getting in with a group of people that are like super legit and like at the top of what they do just is a good place to be. And I also think like sports betting is getting all these headlines, and rightfully so. But like season long fantasy and DFS, especially season long fantasy, like there's such a bright future for it. Like it's just so fun, and there's a lot of money floating around. And I think a lot of people are probably going to be willing to like invest in some of the stuff that we hope to create. And I don't know, I'm just happy to be in early and just see where it goes. And that's kind of why I joined on.
Yeah. Um, I was honestly like somewhat skeptical that Evan and I even needed a kind of business person to do this with us. Like, oh, it's not that complicated. We'll do some podcasts, we'll do some articles, and it'll take off from there. I have since learned that, I mean, every day Taylor and Andrew and I are spending so much time on the back end going through like every little business decision, and there's in like people would be like shocked like what goes on behind the scenes, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So my skepticism has been proven to be foolish, and having someone with Taylor's experience, I think, has made a huge difference. So anybody out there who thinks they're just gonna pop it off and start putting some stuff on a website and start printing, maybe that would be true in the short term. I think in the long term, the business side of stuff is way more complicated than it appears to the user, and even appeared to me when I was working on at sites and stuff like that. If that makes sense. I don't know if you found the same thing, Taylor.
Yeah, for sure. And I think like, you and Evan had talked for years about wanting to do something. And, I think like you guys were originally thinking like kind of small, just like make it so we can, make a living and just have it be very, very, very simple. Like, you doing a podcast and Evan writing a column or something. And, when we started talking about this, and when, to your credit, you kind of realized, or you felt like you wanted to have somebody like running the business side, like we have a bigger vision, and like it's still relatively small compared to a lot of other fantasy sites. Like Establish the Run is not going to offer every single like, article or product or projection or whatever, but like we can make it much more than just like two guys like creating content. And, yeah, I think that's right. And I think like doing well in business is hard work, and it's fun though too. So, it's been super fun to be a part of it.
Yeah. And last thing, Taylor mentioned about the premium side and the way internet content is going. I'm totally sick of people just putting up stuff to get clicks, right? And like, there's so many people, all they care about is, oh, can I get clicks? Will this get interactions? I'm only going to post this. I'm going to post this in a way that gets clicks. I'm going to post this in a way. I'm only doing this to get interactions. I don't even, it doesn't even matter what I say in this tweet or in this video or in this article. It's just, is it going to get clicks? And is this headline going to get clicks? I've been so against that for so long. I've always believed that, if you actually do good stuff, then people will find it. And I think it's becoming more and more so in the internet today. You see it with The Athletic, and you see it with other sites being able to charge money for good content, because people are just sick of all the click bullshit that is out there. So big priority for us is to not be clickbait whores, to actually put out the good stuff, put out the best stuff, and people will find it and recognize it. And most importantly, be willing to pay for it, because you can go around and you can find all this clickbait nonsense from people who don't know what they're talking about or just know how to write a good headline, etc. But those people, you're not actually going to gain value from it. So yeah, that would be my thing, about the premium side of it, et cetera, et cetera. Anything else on why it's good? The internet is changing for good. There's so much negativity on the internet. I feel like there is going to be like an evolution of the internet where there's actually good on the internet.
Yeah, for sure. No, I get made fun of constantly because I'm like a huge optimist, like about the world, and I think it's just getting so much better. And we don't need to go into that here, but I guess just thinking about Establish the Run, we charge a subscription fee so that we don't have to. We can do what we think is the right thing content wise always. We don't have to worry about like selling ads. We don't have to worry about even affiliate revenue, or we haven't done anything. I mean, I think we might have like generated like 3 signups for DraftKings or something like that, because all of our customers they tend to already be on the fantasy sites, and that's great. But like we're just focused. If people pay us money, then we have our own discretion to determine what is best for them, and as far as like doing better at DFS and fantasy. And I just don't think most sites, that's not the business model that the free sites or sites that charge a very small amount of money have, because they have to figure out how to generate revenue other ways. And the business model is also different because they're paying, people that are not really that, knowledgeable, small amounts of money to create the content. Whereas we have, like some pretty heavy hitters, guys like yourself and Evan that are like full-time. This is all they do. They've spent a decade plus learning, and, it's just a different model. And I'm just really optimistic about it.
Yeah. Shout out to us. Okay. One of our goals for the off season is to get you guys more free content on YouTube. Go to Establish the Run's YouTube page. I'll put a link in the description. Please hit subscribe, and you'll get to see all the videos. We'll be doing a bunch with Evan on free agency. We'll be doing a bunch of off season stuff as we get ready for best ball season, NFL draft, NFL free agency, et cetera, et cetera. Also, if you go to establishtherun.com, now you can get in on our XFL package. XFL kicks off on February 8th. I have spent most of the last 2 weeks, pathetically, or I guess sadly, researching XFL and getting up to speed for kickoff on Saturday. DFS action is going to be big. Both sites have gone 300K and 350K guaranteed on their big GPPs. And just like the edge in niche sports like this is just going to be so massive out of the gate. We'll have depth charts. We'll have a live show. We'll have plenty more content, top plays, plenty more content for XFL. You can go to the site and find it there. And we'll be back later this week, actually, with Evan for his first look at kind of a free agency overview, look at some of the unrestricted free agents that are coming to a market for an NFL team near you this spring. So I hope you guys enjoyed this industry-centric podcast. For Taylor, for producer Luke, for Jerry, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.